mackerel. First time I've ever been late for the live show. Normally I'm early. Let's let Grim be out. There you go, buddy. Yep. I look forward to you kicking my door open shortly. That's how that works. Let my dog out for the live show, and then he'll demand to be let in. Well, good morning. I want to get this up here just so I can see sort of the live show happening. It gives me comfort. Click my name. Click here. Mute this live show. Click that button. Oh, it's pre-muted. Excellent. That's the way I like to take my Atom, is pre-muted. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. It's not Thanksgiving for me, but hey, another opportunity to be thankful. I will take it. It's Thanksgiving for my neighbors down on south. Thanksgiving is a cool, it's a cool holiday that, like most holidays, is probably not really honored for its intention anymore. You know, like I don't know how often people, a lot of everything becomes commercialized. That's the nature of the world that we live in. That's kind of the nature of capitalism. And lest you think capitalism can be solved with like, well, that's why we should be communist. Capitalism is part of our human nature. That's the desire for humans to like amass stuff to hold themselves safe, and as we become more sophisticated, stuff like, I don't know, like a nice looking knife on your desk becomes a proxy for the safety that we used to experience just from having grapes and enough food for the winter. But make no mistake, if we got rid of capitalism, there's a reason that, like, you know, you end up with communist countries having a ton of corruption. It's because it's human nature. You can try to impose something over top of it, but it won't matter. That human nature is going to grow up. And so we want to, rather than what's the word? Demonize that tendency, be like, oh, capitalism's a problem, we need to do away with it. No, we need to embrace that part of ourselves. And embracing doesn't mean just let it go hog. It means that we need to acknowledge that that's just a part in each of us. We all have this clutchy, fear-based, sort of avaricious, I need more part of ourselves. And we have to start to become friends with that. We have to make space for it and hold it and be able to allow it there. And only once we do that can we start to work in partnership with it. As long as we're trying to pretend that's not us, I'm not like that person, it's hard for us to do that. What's up, Raf? I'm thankful for the live show, and I'm thankful for you saying that. So yeah, Thanksgiving is a cool holiday. The spirit of it is fantastic. It's an interesting one too, because Canada and the States both celebrate Thanksgiving. We arrived at the holiday separately. It's convergent evolution. We both countries came to this celebration of Thanksgiving. Up north here, we do ours in October, and down south they do theirs in November. And for us, Thanksgiving is like a nice holiday, kind of along the lines of maybe I don't know, like maybe a little more celebrated than on Valentine's Day, but not a lot. Like there's an actual day off for Thanksgiving, whereas Valentine's Day is not a day off. But really, it's not a huge deal. We get together with our family, we have a nice turkey dinner, and then that's it. Whereas in the States, Thanksgiving is a massive holiday. From what I can tell and from what I've heard, it's arguably the biggest holiday. A bigger deal almost than Christmas, perhaps even in contention for being the biggest holiday. So that's an interesting one. And it's funny because I noticed like all of my podcast feed is all reruns, or there's just nothing being put out. Social media is quieter because everyone kind of gets ready for this week off and slows down. So anyhow, happy Thanksgiving if you're American. Happy Thanksgiving if you're not American. I hope everyone listening after the fact and everyone watching has something they can be thankful for. You know what the good news is? You do. Just have to look for it. I've got some Magic the Gathering cards that I'm looking at right now. They're boring, so I'm not going to keep looking through them. I was like, is there something for me to talk about here that's of interest? The answer is no. No, there is not. They're just what's on my desk right now. I have some cool rocks. I want to show you this piece right here and then tell you about significance, spirituality, and what my path to creating a little more of a relationship to spirit and spirituality has looked like. So this is a piece of carnelian. When carnelian is polished, it looks like this. It's a beautiful stone. I don't think it's precious in any way. I think it's quite abundant, but it looks very fiery, gorgeous. What a cool piece of carnelian. Usually whenever I go on like a trip for work and we go somewhere, one of the things Ben and I will always do is we'll try to find a crystal store and buy like a cool rock. And then it's like, oh yeah, I remember this. I bought this rock this was the last time I was leading when I was a part of Rich Litvin's community. It was the last time I was leading a leadership team. I was moving on after that. So that kind of holds that, contains that for me. Anyhow, this is what carnelian looks like when you find it in the wild. Looks much less impressive, right? What's super cool, I think, about this piece is that they cut it right, like very sharply on either side. And so what that does is we can kind of see what the rock looks like in its seam, I guess. And up close, if my camera will focus on, you can see like these really cool like striations here. And I mean, isn't that gorgeous? It kind of looks tasty. It looks like a nice piece of meat. I want to take a bite out of this carnelian. Anyhow, I think that's a cool piece. I love how that just sits on my desk. Reminds me of like one of the things I like about a crystal like this is that this rough part. Oh, a piece just fell off. Oh, you're breaking on me, carnelian. This little piece just fell onto my desk. Anyhow, one of the cool things about a rock or crystal like this is that it's a reminder for me that like on the outside, we often look like this, an unpolished stone, not that impressive. And then inside, if we are only willing to do a bit of digging and work, there's this gorgeous, gorgeous interior. I'm going to read to you from this pocket book of stones, the meaning of carnelian, and then we'll talk about that quickly. And then we'll get into our topics for today. Here we go, carnelian. Key words: courage, vitality, sexuality, confidence, and action. Marianne Smith says, is collecting rocks better than taking pictures for you? I like them both. The thing with pictures is I don't tend to, they live on my phone and I don't tend to go back to them, or they sit in an album and I don't tend to go back to them. Whereas like this stone sits on my desk over there and then is just a reminder when I come into my office. I've got like, oh, this piece of rose quartz. That's a reminder to practice unconditional self-love. So I don't know if it's better. It's just what, maybe that's what you mean by better. It resonates more for me. It tends to be more in my space. Okay, let's read about carnelian. Carnelian is an orange-colored variety of chalcedony with a hardness of 7. Way to go, being hardness of 7. They're found in India, Brazil, and Uruguay. Carnelian activates the first, second, and third chakras, bringing an influx of life force, sexual and creative energies, and assertive will. It is a powerful aid to those who wish to build their confidence, courage, passion, and power. It is a stone of physical vitality and energy and can act spiritually to help one regain one's strength after illness or injury. Carrying or wearing it can aid in awakening the vital energies of the lower 3 chakras, increasing zest for living, and the willingness to take the risks inherent in all strong actions. Is that true? I don't know. It's written in this book, but I don't know what the source for this book was. I just bought the book because I was like, what do people say about these stones? I was at a ceremony 2 months ago. I was meant to be there this week, but life had different plans for me. Spirit did. And so anyhow, three months or so ago, we were down there, and Bay and I like to like bring some rocks because it's pretty and it's nice to have them around you. And someone was like, "Hey, can you guys help me? Like, how do I start to work with crystals?" And we were like, I don't know. We wouldn't hold ourselves out as an expert on that. We're just nerds, rock nerds. We like the beautiful stuff that the planet creates. And what I like to do is I just buy what looks pretty to me. This is a beautiful stone and I'm drawn to it. So I always buy that sort of stuff, and then everything evokes something for us. Like this piece of malachite evokes some feeling for you. It's shaped in an egg. It has some kind of thought that comes to you when you see it. This piece of, what is this? This is pyrite. I think they call these generators when they're in this shape. This pyrite obelisk creates some kind of a feeling or evoke something for you. And for me, what's written in this book is really someone distinguishing and distilling whatever collectively we tend to find evoked by these colors, these symbols, these feelings, the way this rock looks, the way it's sort of shaped. The last time I was at our local rock store, um, I was talking to the owner, who's a total nerd about this stuff. He's just a geologist all the way through, and he was sharing how quartz. I've got a piece of quartz here. Naturally, the crystals of quartz want to form into like a six. You can't really see it on this one, but like the natural shape they're drawn towards into is six facets. Whereas pyrite, I just showed you this obelisk here. Pyrite naturally forms into these cool cube shapes. So this hasn't been like, this is probably not that interesting on the podcast, but this is just a piece of pyrite. This is two crystals of pyrite that naturally form in this shape, which to me is fucking crazy. They just form in these perfect shaped cubes. That's absolutely mind blowing to me. So the crystal has the atoms, the way they form has like an essence to themselves, if you like. They naturally form into these shapes, and that evokes something for us. So what I was raised with, this is where I've arrived at these days. It's like, yeah, feeling, seeing, this evokes a certain thing for me. When I feel a nice, beautiful green chunk of stone that's been polished into a shape, it evokes like vitality, and it makes me think of like courage and bravery. Whatever it does for you is fine too. However, growing up, what I was raised with was my dad, my mom to a lesser extent, more my dad. His attitude for all of this stuff is to laugh and say it's bullshit. So kind of to derisively laugh at it and set it aside. And initially, I think this started as like a joke, haha, that's bullshit. It's fun to just sort of say that, not maliciously, not with ill will, but sort of like, you goofball, you nitwit. What are you guys believing in these days? But over time, as you do that more and more, that stops being a joke and it becomes your worldview. And so the worldview I inherited from my dad, this isn't malicious, this wasn't him doing something dumb, but was like, that's bullshit. And something being bullshit is a really effective way to keep ourselves safe. When something is bullshit, I don't really have to give it any more thought. I can set it aside. I've looked at it, I've considered it, I've deemed it bullshit. I will have no more of it. And so in my life, I became very effective, very good at learning just enough about something to be able to dismiss it, which became a very effective way to stay safe, a very effective way to ensure that there's no room really for things like spirituality to exist in your life. It's all that there is room for is like what you know. There's what I know, and then, oh, you're bringing this new thing and you're saying something. Well, let me look into it. I'm going to look at it through these things. I've determined how it's bullshit. Now I can say it is bullshit, and then I push it aside. And so the journey for me to like come back around to a more spiritual sense, a more spiritual existence. One second. Oh no, they've rung the doorbell, but they've left. My dog erupted into barking. Has been a lot of working through that it's bullshit kind of mentality, because that's what I adopted too, and really relished for a while in the safety that allowed me. And I've had to do a lot of unwinding with that, a lot of like, it's been very frustrating at times, the journey to kind of to how would I put it, to like see how I'm actively dismissing every new thing that can come into my life by calling it bullshit. And then I haven't had to do anything, right? But I've wanted a deeper experience of spirit that started to come forward for me as I was maturing and developing. And that required noticing when those moments showed up. And then rather than being like, but it is bullshit, or insisting that, or bring it to my coach and being like, how do I tell this person that they're full of shit or something like that? To actually take a look at like, what is it I'm scared about in this moment? Like, what has me reaching for the safety of dismissing something and not having to sit with it? And can I, like, whatever that thing is, whatever's there that has me jump to the self-defense of like, it's bullshit, dismiss it, move on. what is that? And if I can sit in that, then I can start to like open and allow more spaciousness. I don't have to dismiss everything. And then I have more room for more stuff in my life. It doesn't have to be thrown aside under the mantle of being bullshit. So I don't know. I felt a little bit, uh, what's the way? A little bit scattered in my speaking of that. I didn't have that too organized, but hopefully that provides something. Raf saying he's having one of his camp knives handled. It'll have a malachite spacer. Malachite is this cool ass green stone for everyone watching. I love malachite. It ends up it's like a stone that gets formed in layers. It often looks like it was created by stalactites dripping to me. That's pretty cool. Stalactite, I meant stalactite, and that's the word I said instead of stalagmite. Pretty pleased with myself for getting those two right. Didn't even have to think about it. All right, well, we got some topics, guys. I've got a sore neck. I've been playing too much pickleball. My body is sore. I feel old because I am. It's all right. Where are we going to start here? We're going to start with a question from Monica Hunter. Monica asked us a while back, and I never got around to answering it, so we're bringing it on back. Monica says, I have a thing, and it goes like this. So one, she's got a thing to start off. I have a thing, and it goes like this. One, I thought that I need to do things that are outside my comfort zone in order to allow for more possibility. So she's got this thought, I need to do things outside of my comfort zone in order to allow for more possibility in my life. I should do stuff outside of my comfort zone. Okay. Two, second thought. I have a second thought that being in the flow with things feeling easy, nourishing, and energizing is the better path to creating what the universe wants me to create. Are these two thoughts, oh, sorry, and then she's saying, and these two thoughts are at loggerheads. Would you be open to speaking on this a bit? So she's got a fundamental tension between two things. One is, in order to grow past a certain point, I need to get outside my comfort zone. I got to push into my resistance to create more possibility. And then the second conflicting thought is, but I need to be in flow. I need to be relaxed. I need to be just okay with things as they are. I need for things to be easy and nourishing and energizing. That's the better way to create stuff. So how do we rationalize these two things? How do we integrate? Maybe that's the word. Reconcile. That's the word I wanted. How do we reconcile these two things? So I'm going to broaden this out first, and then we'll come back to Monica's question. And the broadening here is that the universe has a fundamental polarity to it. There's a fundamental tension built into like life. Life is a continual polarity between different things. So what I mean by that, at the most like atomic level, the most basic building blocks level of the universe, there's a tension between the force of gravity and I don't know what the force would be. Probably it's a repulsive force. It'd be like explosion or whatever. So if one force pulls things together and another force pushes them away. So like in the center of a star, what's happening is there's a huge amount of chemical interactions going on. Basically, an ongoing explosion is what's going on in a star. Boom, boom, boom. It's constant explosion pushing out. And at the same time, you have a fuck ton of matter. And all that matter is being operated on, we'll say, by the force of gravity, which is pulling it all together. And if the force of gravity, which is like a constant in our universe as far as we can tell, if the force of gravity was greater, that explosion would be overcome. It would all collapse. This is what happens when a star forms into a black hole, is that the expulsive force, the explosion starts to slow down. There's not enough material to sustain that explosion. And then the gravity collapses the star. And, there's a few stages where the star kind of collapses. It gets even tighter, and that starts a new kind of explosion for a while. But eventually that runs out, and then boom, it collapses. It compresses down. Gravity overcomes, wins out in the end, and collapses it in onto itself, forming a singularity, a black hole. If the force of gravity in our universe happened to be higher, stars would never form. They would just be overcome by gravity, collapse in black holes, and then we wouldn't have the life of our sun and all of that sort of stuff. At the same time, if the explosive force, whatever that is, was greater than gravity, stars would blow themselves apart and they would have no life cycle. They'd have no lifespan. The material would come together, blow itself apart, and then that would be that. We wouldn't have these giant flaming balls of gas in the universe helping sustain life, allowing life to be created. There's a tension fundamentally. I'm getting nerdy and physical with you because it shows that there's a fundamental tension baked into our universe that gravity and whatever this force is, I think it's the weak nuclear force. I know there's four. There's electromagnetic force, there's gravity, there's the strong nuclear force, and there's the weak nuclear force. One of those I don't know. It doesn't matter. Fundamentally, that tension exists. And that fundamental tension, that polarity between those two things exists everywhere in everything in our life. So here's some examples that I wrote down over here. There's a tension between our liberty and our security. This is a continual tension that political sides battle against constantly. If you want maximum liberty, maximum freedom, the cost of doing so is that you don't get to have as much security. You can't have both. Those two things are in like a polarity with one another. If you want maximum security, the way you do that is you lock, that's a prison. Prison has maximum security, not a lot of liberty, right? Maximum liberty is anarchy. If you have full liberty, that opens things up to people being able to commit crime. It has to, because that's the nature of the greatest extent of liberty. So that's an example of tension. What are some others that I've seen lately? I can't remember, but Monica's example is a great one too, which is on the one hand, I want to grow beyond my current capacity, and that requires that I push outside of my comfort zone. On the other hand, I just want things to be easy and simple and like in flow. It's a fun word. People call that flow. And how do I reconcile these two things? They're kind of at odds with each other. And that's true. They are in tension with one another. So all transformation, all mastery. Hey, Ruth, happy Thanksgiving from the Americas to you. Neither Ruth nor I are American, but that's cool because we can co-opt this. We're co-opting their holiday and wishing each other Thanksgiving. How do we work with this tension then, right? And before we get into like how you work with it, part of what I think is really important here is to recognize that there is that tension, and that's always at the heart of mastery. Anytime someone is walking a path of mastery, what they're learning to do is walk the tightrope between a polarity like this. I just thought of another example. That example is like kind of chemistry and intimacy and polarity. And then I need to pick my words carefully because it's easy for people to misunderstand what I'm saying. So if don't create a soundbite out of this. But the other side of it would be like consent and safety and like not doing something you're uncomfortable with. And to some extent, part of the dance of being intimate with someone, there's a degree to which, like, if you ask for consent every step of the way, so if you're like, I would like to hold your hand, I would like to gaze into your eyes for the next 30 seconds, I would like to ask you a question about your parents, I would like to take you on a second date. Now that we're on the second date, I would like to order something for you, but I don't want to be too much of a man who just makes assumptions. So would that be okay? There's a point at which that becomes very depolarizing. There's no chemistry, there's no spark, there's no edginess in that. It becomes rote and watered down. And so now don't take my words and say Adam's advocating for a lack of consent or anything. What I'm saying is that that's another example. And here's why I'm bringing that one into the mix is because anytime we have a polarity, what tends to happen is we want to resolve it. We want to resolve the tension we feel caught between these two dyads, these two things that are in tension with one another. And so we resolve it one of two ways. We go all the way to the one side or all the way to the other side. So you can see that in a lot of like The war on drugs is sort of like the problem is this, and therefore we need to punish these people, make the behavior wrong. Or the problem is that in response to the Me Too movement, consent, 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 consent. The trouble is that what happens when we swing out one way or the other is that we lose the tension, and the tension's the magic. I'm not saying just go to one side or the other. The problem is going to either side. The problem is leaving one side and being like, oh, got it. What I need to do is just sit and flow. Or what I need to do is just get super like willing to push into my resistance and fuck how I feel. Both of those are an approach where you push out to one side and you step off of the tension. And then in doing so, you lose the art of the moment. You lose the opportunity for mastery. So we can see this everywhere. A lot of the places where people find themselves stuck societally, as individuals, in organizations, are where there's a fundamental tension to what someone's working with, and the move is to like swing in one direction or the other direction. Now, what's nice about swinging in one of those two directions is it gives us this sense of like, ha, I've resolved this. Ah, I'm so glad that's handled, right? I've chosen something, I'm doing the right thing. There's just no art there. And so what'll happen is you'll swing to this side, but because the tension never fully goes away, because the tension's fundamental, you'll hang out this side and things won't work that well. And then your other option is, I guess I'll go all the way to the other side. So if you read Who Do You Think You Are? Well, bam. If you read this book, you'll notice that all of the shadows listed, the overexpressed and the underexpressed, are fundamentally a tension between two sides of someone trying to like get the love that they think they can't get. And the obvious but ineffective fixes are the thing that moves us to the other side of our shadow. So we just stay in this pendulum. That's why there's a pendulum, is because of this fundamental polarity in the world. So now we can go back to Monica's question. I've laid all that groundwork. Her question is like, I've got these two competing thoughts. On the one hand, I should be pushing beyond my comfort zone. On the other hand, I should just be okay and sit and flow and ease and relax. So how do we create mastery in the midst of all of this? The first sneaky answer here is that this is why we have senseis, why we have coaches, why we have teachers, why we have leaders, why we have someone that is not inside of our own head. Is why we have someone who is off the court entirely with us, trained to support us, as opposed to like a friend or a family member. They're in the game with us. It'd be sort of like asking your teammate on the court with you for like, hey, what should I do on court because it's not working, as opposed to asking the coach, right? The teammate's in it with you, so they're just not the best source. The coach is off. They have the ability to create altitude because they're off the space with you. So there's no right answer to this. Sometimes when I'm working with someone, my people, we tend to be really like, I need to do the hard work. That just tends to be how we've been how we've grown into adulthood, is we're like, I will do the hard work. I'm driven. I will do what it takes. I'm willing to run through that brick wall. For those sort of people, often it's like, oh, you're spending all your time leaned out over this side. Let's have you practice on this side. For other people, their natural bias will be towards like well-being, and that that bias, like, how could we criticize well-being? But that's part of also why it's so sticky. It's because like, oh, I don't do anything unless I get 10 hours of sleep, and I don't do anything unless I just feel that what my body needs right now is for me to relax and rest. And that's great until that is the thing in the way of everything else you want in your life, at which point it's like, oh, there's a new capacity for you to expand beyond. So if that's the lane for people, then the support is sometimes to help them see like, wow, it's great, but you seem to be all the way on this side, and we need to move you over to this side a little bit. Have you practiced that way? And this is what in Eastern traditions they refer to as the middle path. The middle path is this idea where someone's walking and their sensei, their teacher, says, hey, it's time for you to walk a little on the left. And they're like, okay, got it. Thank you, sensei. Great. And they walk on the left side of the path and they're like, hell yeah, I'm crushing the left side of this path. And then the next day, the sensei comes and they're like, you need to be walking more on the right side of the path. And then they're like, what the fuck? Yesterday you told me left side. I'm walking on the left side. And the sensei's answer is typically something along the lines of, I did. And you have walked to the left side, but now you're a little too far on the left side, and you need to come over to the right side. And mastery as humans, mastery in life is often about learning to sit on the knife's edge of the tension between these things that are creating polarity for us. So, oh, we've gone a little too far over towards the edge of security. Now we need to come back and introduce more liberty. And oh, we've gone a little too far over to the edge of liberty. We need to come back and come back on this side. And what happens as you work with a coach is a couple of things. The first is you learn to become comfortable sitting on the knife's edge as opposed to resolving that tension. So you learn to be okay with the tension inherent in polarity. I can sit here. The second thing is you start to become better and better at feeling your balance in amidst that tension. So kind of like learning to ride a bike, at first you're correcting a lot. If you start to feel yourself lean to the left, you're like lean way out over to the right. And you're like, whoa, shit. And then you hang out there and you lean way out over to the left because you're like, shit, I'm going to fall off this bike. This is quite wild. And as time moves on, you become more and more nuanced in your ability to sort of feel where you are and like, oh, I need to just move a touch and I need to move a little bit more and a little bit more. And so in ontological work, which is to say you are working on who you are being in the midst of all of this, in the midst of these tensions, over time, someone who stays in this work for a long time, they never finish. An object to stay in balance is to fundamentally forever be perpetually off balance. You're never like right there steady. You're always a little bit on the one edge so that you're then leaning to the other side, or a little bit on one side so you're leaning to the other side. This is in snowboarding. For anyone that's ever snowboarded, you know that the rookie move is to sit flat on your snowboard and just go like this. Because what happens is as you do that, eventually you catch an edge and you go, wah, and you fall. And you're like, fuck snowboarding, I hate this sport. The thing to do is to always be leaning on one of your two edges, because then you're actually in a state of imbalance and you can push against in the other direction. So you're engaging with polarity as opposed to trying to sit fully balanced. That's life too. We always want to be engaging with the sort of lack of balance as opposed to striving to find this perfect midpoint where there's no tension for us to be in. And so as you deepen into this kind of work, what happens is you get better and better and better at feeling where is my center, where is my balance, but there's always going to be a deeper level of sophistication you can work with, a deeper level of mastery. So you find people that are deep ontologically in their work, who tend also to be people who are quite mature spiritually. Their spiritual age is quite mature. It's not that they can relate very well to the troubles that we all have because they are familiar with them themselves. It's just that the level at which they're playing at, the level at which they're in and out of balance is much more sophisticated. It's much more nuanced and subtle than what a lot of us are playing with. So for Monica, to come back around to her question, like, can you speak on this, Adam? And what do you do when you're kind of working this way? For a lot of people in the early days, if they've spent like the last 20 years of their life, like, I'm just going to sit in ease and flow, often the practice is like, it's time for you to get into, if you want this, if you want things to change. If you don't want things to change, great, hang out in ease and flow. Seems like it's working good for you. Or if I get like a business leader who's like, I'm grinding and I'm making tons of money, but I want things to be different, but I don't. It's like, great. If you want this life to keep going this way and to keep picking up pace down this path, then stay here. You don't need to do anything. But if you want things to be different, then what there is to do is to practice the other side for a while. Very gross. It's not subtle, it's gross. Do the other thing for a while. What tends to happen is that people who are like really, really driven kind of go all the way to the other side. This is basically what the book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari is about. I don't find that book particularly subtle. It's pretty gross in its application. It's like this business guy who was crazy, and then he went and hung out with monks, and then he went all the way to the other side, and now he just lives by flow. It's a beautiful image. It's not particularly masterful. So typically these people come all the way to the other side and then they're like, oh my God, I feel so relaxed and peaceful. And then what stops them from coming back over here is their fear that if they let go of the peace they've created, then they're going to go back to the insanity, the intensity that they once had. So they get caught all the way on this side. And what that does is it stops them from learning how to develop the nuance of walking the middle path. So often I hear when people have a common refrain I hear in the coaching profession, I'll take one step back. A lot of people get into the coaching profession because they are disempowered about who they are being at their current jobs. They don't have consciousness of this. They're not aware that this is the case. But what happens is they're like, oh, I'm a high level exec. I'm a CEO. I'm grinding. I'm making a ton of money. Fuck this. I hate it. And then they leave their job from that place and they come to coaching and they want to support other people to have a better life. And what they've done is they've swung that pendulum over to the other side. They've resolved the tension. They're no longer intense and insane and all of that. They're now flow state. That's all I do. That's what I hang out. And so a lot of people in the coaching profession are kind of stuck over on this side. And a common refrain I hear is, well, I'm not willing to give up my peace. I'm not willing to blah, 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 blah. And what those people don't recognize is in their attachment to things staying a particular way, they're not able to discover what's next. The art would be to learn how to come over to this side and experience a little bit more of that like drive, and then to get better and better and better, noticing when their drive, their determination, their human sort of endeavor to create more slips into like the intensity, the insanity, and like, oh, I've slipped there. And then to learn how to turn back this way, and then over time to become more and more nuanced in their ability to walk that knife's edge. Now, the good news is you don't have to do any of this. None of this is a requirement. There's no should to this. There are simply consequences. The consequence of we'll use Monica's words, I need to do things that are outside of my comfort zone in order to allow for more possibility. So the consequence of always hanging out there is muscle fatigue, is injury, is like you redline yourself to the point where you're just like, fuck this. And you hit burnout, you hit ulcers, you hit like cancers, you hit an inability to kind of regulate and to bring yourself down and to give yourself peace, all of that sort of stuff. That's the consequence of that side. When we are only ever over there, there is a consequence. The consequence of the other side, peace, flow, ease, tends to be like a low grade ongoing experience of heartbreak and disappointment. Because in order to always sit in flow, ease, and never pursuing what you really want requires a willingness to not get what you have to dim your desire. Because part of the nature of human desire is to want for something beyond where you are. There's lots of adages that speak to this. The grass is always greener on the other side. People hear that and they're like, yeah, so I should just stop wanting for stuff. The gift of that adage is like, that's the beauty of the human spirit. The human spirit will always long for something more beyond where we currently are. And we want to marry the fundamental tension of these two things so that we can be masterful. But if we hang out on this side where it's like easy and there's flow and blah, 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 the risk, the consequence of that is low grade heartbreak, continual disappointment, and kind of this feeling of like, I feel guilty and like there's more I should be doing. And the refrain we often hear on this side is like a conversation that's like, I just want to feel, I just need to feel happy with where I am, or I just need to feel okay with having things good. I just need to not feel so guilty about the goodness that I have. So there's a lot of like trying to convince themselves to feel okay with where they are. And all of that is a symptom of kind of being unwilling to push beyond their comfort. So that's what I have to say, Monica, about excuse me, what you've brought. Let's see if there's anything else I want to add. It's a nice intimate show. Who are the two viewers? Who are the two people, the diehard fans that are sticking around here? I want to just give you shout outs. It's nice to see your little eyeballs there. I don't have many. Not many eyeballs today. Thanksgiving. Tough for the live show. While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to go to our next one. So we have a question from Simon, which I think is pretty awesome. Hey, Carrie, nice to see you. Happy Thanksgiving. Simon says, how do we debite the tongue with people who are quite sensitive? Hey, Ruth, you two are my hometown heroes. How do we debite the tongue with people who are quite sensitive and not so gifted communicators themselves? Letting the tongue flap free, especially when those overly sensitive people happen to be your family and you know they aren't up for hot bowls of reality soup. This is my friend Simon. Simon and I met at a bar, at a nightclub, where I was dancing way back in the day, and he and his friend came up to me and were like, "You're an amazing dancer," and we started chatting, and then a relationship grew out of that. It was not, I don't have a lot of friendships like that, but he's an Aussie, and so like Ruth's saying, I love his language. Me too. There's a way Simon speaks, it's incredible. He's an amazing dancer too, just an absolutely phenomenal dancer and a super cool guy. So Simon, thanks for your question. It's really great. So if I translate this, Simon is asking, how do I debite the tongue? How do I like speak truth? How do I not just clamp my jaw down and not say what there is for me to say around people that are overly sensitive, that are not so great at communicating? Sidebar, this is everyone listening after the fact. My hair is a bit crazy. I've got quite a pompadour going today. I don't know what to do about that. Feature it, point it out. So, how do you speak your truth, or what do we do when we're around people that are not so gifted communicators themselves or overly sensitive? So the first thing that's really helpful to recognize here, I should probably take a step back. Let me just set some context for us. Here's a context, a place to come from around communication. This is not a truth. This is a place for you to stand in. So it's kind of like a subjective truth you can adopt if you want. I think it's a very powerful one. That context is the responsibility for how a communication lands is entirely on the communicator. So what that means is if I say something, the way what I've said lands over there with someone else, that's entirely my responsibility. Now we have a lot of like easy off-ramps for this, ways to not have to take this kind of responsibility. It's not my fault. They took what I said a different way than I intended. That's a common thing we say, right? Oh, I didn't say that. I didn't blah, blah, blah. What that does is it removes yourself from being the responsible one for how something landed. And what's much more powerful is if you can kind of hold like, no, 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 I get to take responsibility, all of the responsibility for how what I'm saying lands. So when Simon says, how do we communicate effectively with people that are overly sensitive? I'm not saying Simon is saying this, but there's a risk for all of us to be like, well, it's not my fault. They're just overly sensitive. They're just hyper vigilant. They're just fragile little snowflakes. And how I communicate with them, they misconstrue everything I say. And so it's their fault. It's not anything for me to do. To Simon's credit, he's asking, how do we communicate with someone like that? I just wanted to pause and kind of acknowledge that it's really easy to abdicate from our responsibility and put the burden of how this landed over there on someone else because they're too sensitive or they're fragile or they're a snowflake or they're dumb or whatever, whatever, whatever. So our job as leaders, if we are interested in really being powerful in how we communicate, is to take responsibility for the way something landed. Taking responsibility does not mean that we will always do something different, but it does mean that we see how we could have a different impact if we chose to. So what Simon is ultimately talking about here is like, how do we be artful in our communication? How do I share a truth, but in a way that like opens the moment as opposed to closing it down? I'm taking some liberties, but I would assert that's ultimately what Simon's talking about, and it's what most of us want. So if I am one of these people that goes around telling people I'm just a truth teller, I speak truth, aka shitheads. If I'm one of those people, that's fine. I can go into a space and be like, your tie's ugly and your hair looks bad. I could say that. And what that will do is it'll close the energy. People will feel bad. People will be left feeling hurt. and then they will close their hearts. And so the energy of someone doing that is that they are someone who closes the energy, they tighten the vibe, if you like, and and so what you end up with is a bunch of people that are a little bit tighter in their energetic being. So their breath is more shallow. Their thoughts become a little more linear. They become more focused on self-preservation than they do on collaboration. They become less open to new ideas, etc. That's all a consequence of what happens when our energy closes. As we close energetically, we're moving from a state of liberty to security. Remember from before? We become more linear in our approach, and we become more self-referential. The fancy triggering way to say that is become more narcissistic. Everyone becomes more narcissistic as we become more fearful. That's the nature of fear. Fear says I'm at risk. And so when I'm at risk, what am I going to do? I stop worrying about you. I start worrying about me. How do I preserve me? That's narcissism. Not the diagnosable personality disorder, but the thing we all fling that label at. Oh, they're such a narcissist. They're so narcissistic. We're really saying they're self-centered. So fear makes us more self-centered. Now, walking back, a truth teller without any art is someone that just says what they think in the moment. They kind of just blurt a whole bunch. And what they tend to do is they close the energy, and then that leads to all of these sort of things. So Simon could do that. The thing is that most of us as human beings, we actually don't want, that's not really our desire. We're just stuck in the tension between there's a truth that I feel, and then there's an impact to communicating it. And I'm not sure how to I don't know how to walk on the knife's edge of that. I don't know how to be with that polarity. On the one hand, I can stifle my truth. I can just bite my tongue, clamp my jaw shut. And then I guess at least the moment didn't close, but I'm closing. And I'm dying inside, and I'm giving myself ulcers, because that energy gets stuck inside of me. And then what happens when you try to contain an energy? It bangs against the walls. It wears you down. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Ontological dis-ease. Or the alternative is, I got to get this energy out, and then we just barf it onto someone else, and we close the moment down, and at least we're clear of it. But then we shut the moment down. We're like, fuck, what do I do? Neither of these options is really what we want as a human. It's just all that we can see is available. And so when someone arrives at this place where they're like, I'm just a truth teller, what they've kind of concluded is it hurts too much. Sorry, I should say what they've concluded unconsciously is it hurts too much to just hold this in. But the only other option is for me to say it and people have a reaction. So I guess I just need to learn to be okay with people having that reaction. And that's where they end up. And then as they get better, as they do that more and more, they get better and better and better at being okay with people being hurt by the things that they've said, and better and better and better at justifying why that's just the way it has to be. So that just becomes the game that they get stuck in their life. So what I've been doing here is kind of like laying out how we arrive here. Now we want to talk about how do we transcend that? How do we create art rather than get stuck into that? Take a pause for some water and read what you've written before I do that, Ruth. Ruth says, I went on a date last week, and it must have hit a nerve when I asked if they read much. They explained that they're dyslexic and then provided a diatribe about how fantastic they are at different sports, chess, darts, and gardening without giving me an opening to speak. Sounds like a tender spot for them. I can imagine it would be. I would bet dyslexia would be, because it's something distinct from a lot of people, I would imagine, for someone, they'd feel like, fuck, I feel dumb or insecure. So it's not that you did something wrong, Ruth, probably just walked into a landmine, oh, snap, didn't even realize that was there. And then boom, their defenses come on. Super common. You see that a lot. So, Ruth, if you have questions about that, please put them in the chat and I'll make sure to speak to them. I'm going to come back to where I was first. So we've got this notion of how do I create art in the moment? How do I not just shut myself down, but how do I also honor someone's sensitivity? So the best thing, the starting point is for us to notice how do I communicate to people in a way that has them then show up as overly sensitive? So what I mean is like, I have no idea how Simon's communicating with the people he's talking about, nor any of you. But if I say something and then people take offense to it, the opportunity for me is to take a look, not from blame, just from curiosity and perhaps some responsibility. How did I say that in such a way that might have left them feeling insensitive? Sorry, left them feeling overly sensitive, tender. And what that does is it brings us into a inquiry that kind of has us learn to be a little more artful. How did I say that? What were the words I used? Was there a tone of voice? What was my energy? What was I feeling behind the surface as I said that? For example, someone might be complaining about bad drivers, and we might feel, well, you're the fucking worst driver in the entire fucking world, stupid. That might be what we're feeling inside. And so communicating from that point, even if we're certain, no, 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 Adam, no, I might feel those things, but I don't say it in my speaking, you're wrong. Your internal state will get communicated. You are unable to avoid that. You are not a black box. As much as we believe that we are, as much as we're convinced it's possible, you're not. I promise you that energy gets conveyed one way or the other. So as a starting point, the way we're relating to the person as we're speaking to them is going to be really determinative. So I might be like, someone's complaining about driving, and then I'm like, but you're a terrible driver. One of the places we can practice is, what can I see is good about this person? What can I see is really going on beneath the surface? I can start to ask myself questions that get me a little bit more on their side, as opposed to being on this side where I'm like, but you're stupid, but you suck, but you do all those sort of things. It can be really helpful for us to kind of get over there and understand the world as it looks for them. We don't do that as humans. We understand the world as it looks for them through the lens of how the world looks for us. So I'm like understanding you from inside my frame. And that's not the same as me setting aside my frame and sitting over there with them. And so that's the biggest step. It's like, okay, my uncle Reggie is terrible at driving and he's complaining about other drivers. What's going on here? Like, what might be up for Reggie? How might this be occurring? Because what we're really wanting to do is speak in such a way that allows Reggie to open a little bit more. So we could say, but you're a terrible driver, Reggie, and that's going to have him close further. And then we're dealing with this closure. It's not going to go any particular way. If we can get Reggie to open a little bit, then he might be able to discover for himself some of his bad driving. Or he might be able to just be a little bit more open to some feedback or something like that. The trouble is that a lot of us try to give feedback in such a way that it like closes someone and then we have to like hammer the feedback in, which is why feedback fucking sucks. That's why feedback is so terrible in businesses and why it seems to go terribly over and over and over the way it seems to go. So this is the nature. This is how kind of what we're working with. So we want to put ourselves over there. We want to start to understand like what's going on. And we also want to ask ourselves, how can I speak in such a way that allows me to honor my truth and would open the moment up a little bit? So this is the challenge for a lot of us, because what most of us are so used to doing is censoring ourselves or spitting fire, like just blah, vomiting what we have to say. And we get more and more polarized to those two extremes because we sort of say a truth and people are like, how could you do that? You're so insensitive. And so we go over to this side and we try to censor ourselves more until we can't do that anymore. And then we're like, ah, and then we spit it out. And then people are like even more offended. And then we censor ourselves even more. And we kind of swing more wildly out to the extremes. To create art is to kind of like soften in that and to come a little bit back more towards center and to, instead of just like, what do I have to say? What is my truth? Blah. We start to practice with things like, what is there for me to say? It's like, but you're a bad driver. Like, Reggie, you're a bad driver. Like, you're complaining about this sort of stuff. And how could I allow myself to share some of that truth, the heart of that truth that's like, I don't think this is fair, or I think you're a little hypocritical, or, like whatever it is. How can I share that in a way that would maybe not be the exact same words, but would allow some of my truth to be expressed, some rather than none? And how could I do it in a way that might open the moment? And this question is the heart of creating art in our communication. So I'm trying to think of like ways to do that, and I want to be um, authentic in that I'm often practicing with this. With clients, it's a little easier as a coach because we have a agreement. We have a lot of agreements on the table, and we're there for a rigorous, loving conversation. So I can reflect more powerfully. My friends aren't there for that with me, and and I'm not there for that with them. I'm not looking for my friends to reflect to me like my coach does. It's quite obnoxious when they do. I'm looking for my coach for that. That's why I have a distinct relationship. And so when my friends are doing something where I feel a little like, oh, this is, frustrating, I'm always working with this edge. How could I not shut myself down entirely, but like what would allow the moment to open even just a little bit, as opposed to close even just a little bit? Or if I'm used to closing people that much, how could I speak my truth in such a way that had them close half as much? So even if you just say something in such a way that they close a little bit less than they might normally, that's a victory. That's you working towards creating more art. So I think that's really the place to, like the inquiry to be in, Simon, is how do I express more of my truth than I currently do, right? Some rather than none, as opposed to all. So a lot of art is learning to operate in the nuance as opposed to one side or the other side. How do I express some of my truth as opposed to none? And how do I open the moment? How can I speak that truth in such a way that would open the moment or that would cause less closure than I might otherwise? And if you start to practice with those two things, that's where you start to develop art. Cool. Okay, let's see what you finished up here, Ruth. Ruth writes, I was okay with it until the end of their diatribe. It was really interesting and a good insight into their personality and how driven they are, thinking they need to compensate for being dyslexic. At the end of their diatribe, they asked me if I had any great achievements, and I couldn't think of anything. I found something, but felt quite small in the face of all their achievements. How can I stay open and acknowledge my own gifts and achievements when I'm triggered? That's a great question. The first thought I have is, for me, one of the things that one of the things I grew up with is like my possibility on this planet is inspiration. And part of what's so funny about that being my possibility is I get really intimidated by really inspiring people. Because I'm like, fuck you, you're a challenge to me. And so the question is sort of like, if I took what you're talking about, Ruth, and put it over here with me, it would be like, how do I stay open in the face of someone that's really triggering for me, that where I'm intimidated by them? And what I found makes a big difference for me is when I practice setting myself aside and really let myself be in awe of their achievements. Like, wow, that is amazing. Tell me more about that. So the practice then becomes, well, what happens is someone shows up, I'm in a conversation, I meet someone, they're talking, I'm like, holy fuck, this person's so inspiring. It's crazy what they've created. And then there's a part of me that's like looking for the flaws, right? Because then I'm safe. Oh, but you did that with the help of your parents, so it doesn't count. And oh, that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm as good as you are. That's what I'm doing. And then if I start to try to mm, if I start to try to like, well, how do I not become triggered? I'm still putting all the attention onto me, right? It's a maybe a bit of a better place for my attention to be instead of like fuck you, but I'm still very me focused. And I find what makes the most difference for me is when I take myself out of the picture entirely and just be like, can I just be really inspired by this person? And what's happening there is I'm coming from a place of trusting that I am enough. It doesn't feel that way in the moment. In the moment, it feels like I suck compared to this magnificent statue of a human being in front of me. But the way I'm practicing being is ultimately from a place of I'm enough. So if I trusted that I was enough, I wouldn't need to manage any of this stuff anyhow. And then I could just be okay with how incredible this person is. I'm going to let myself be inspired by them. And so when I do that, what I find happens is my intimidation starts to fall away, as does my being triggered. And then I can just really enjoy this super cool, inspiring person in front of me for all of the gifts that they bring into the space. And from that place, the other thing that's really cool is their insecurity goes away too, because they get to feel like they're seen for who they are. The funny thing that tends to happen is someone will get triggered and then they'll start to spout about their achievements to me, and then I get triggered because they're really inspiring. So then I naturally want to shut down or pull them down, which is then make them feel even more diminished. So then they're going to push even harder, and oh my God, what a mess, right? It's like an arms race. So by me setting myself aside and just like, hold on, this person's inspiring. I want to really be with them. I want to really get this. Way more beauty happens for me. So that's what I find really works. I want to give one more example. It's kind of funny to me. It's around wit. So part of the essence of me, I bring a lot of wit into the space. And what I started to notice in my 30s, it took a while. I was doing this for much longer, but I started to notice it in my 30s, was like I had a real hard time being around other funny people. And the irony of people who are wit is they often wit, play, humor, they tend to like lose the ability to laugh because they become very competitive with other funny people. So I can't just laugh at your joke and be like, that's hilarious. I have to like come back over top and elevate, escalate. I got to make an even funnier version, or I got to play on what you said. And then like the humor kind of dies. And so I found, much like with the inspiration piece for me, there's also been this real piece in learning to just let other people be really hilarious and laugh at their jokes. And that's a work in progress for me still. Um, but when I do that, what I notice is, first of all, I get to laugh more. Life becomes way more fun. And then it also means that I become a person that when I'm in the room, everyone becomes funnier. Be, like at least in my world, if not everyone else's, because I can just laugh at everyone. Instead of when I come into the room, Adam is really funny. So the way it used to be was Adam would come into the room and Adam would be really funny. And I believe more these days what I've created is Adam comes into the room and the room gets to be more funny. That's the gift of our essence. That's challenging because it requires a continual like setting aside our fear that tells us like, uh-oh, this person has the same flavor of gifts you do. Pull them down so that you're the best. We don't actually have to do that. So I don't know to what extent that actually answers your question, Ruth, but that's kind of what shows up. And it sounds kind of similar, you're a woman of great achievement, and yet in the face of that person sort of like kind of sharing all the stuff they've achieved, you're left feeling like, I feel small and diminished. And I think if it was me in that situation, what I would find not easy, because it'd be in the face of my fear, but like would probably sail me through the rough waters would be to really just be in awe of what they created and be like, wow, that's really cool. That's remarkable. That's so cool that you're up to all those things. So that's the practice I like to take on. All right, well, I have like some other topics, but it's been a bit of a slow live show today. We've just got Ruth and I, so I think we're going to wind down there. I think that'll be where we finish up. We'll bring these other topics forward to probably next week once people are back in it. I think I'm also going to do kind of a midweek evening live where I'll make some cocktails and it'll be I won't wear pants. It'll be a little bit more risque. So that'll come up sometime this week. We'll do that. And Ruth, thank you for hanging out till the end. Thanks, Carrie, for being here. Thank you, Raph. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, everyone that joined us. Hope you guys have an amazing Thanksgiving weekend. I'll catch you soon. Peace.